Hello and welcome back to this damn Idealistic Crusade. I wanted to do a special video because I dabble in reading comics, and I have a small comic collection, but I don't really follow comics avidly. Just really more of a passing interest, I guess you would say it is. I enjoy reading comics, but since I'm not doing it on a regular basis, it's always been more of just reading various issues and reading trades and collections and libraries. And I do really enjoy and prefer collections or trade paperbacks more because I like reading a full story arc. I'm not super big on serialized storytelling over many issues of comics. So I done a couple videos comics related in regards to this channel, and my focus is primarily on my favorite characters. But I was inspired to get some more comics for two reasons. One, my local comic shop had a big inventory sale, and anytime my local store has a sale that's a significant sale, I have problems. And I go in thinking, oh, well, I'll just look around for a minute, and then my wallet is depleted and wants to murder me. So I didn't go too terribly crazy, but some of the values of, especially for some collections and trades that they had, were really substantial. So I couldn't resist. Well, as you can see, this turned into a healthy stack of several thousand pages of comics when I thought I was just going in for, oh, I might buy a comic at half off, maybe one or two. Famous last words for me. The other reason is, of course, the wonderful channel of Michael K. Vaughan, who is a wonderful booktuber who also does comic book videos, and he has a team up with some other channels for Epic Comic Book Wednesday, where he and a bunch of other booktube channels talk about a various comic book every Wednesday. And those are always fun and discuss some comics that I've always wanted to actually get around to reading. And he's been talking about some Silver and Bronze Age Superman, and particularly he talked about in one video some of the DC Showcase volumes of a lot of Silver Age and onward Superman, particularly mid to late 50s into the early 60s of Superman. And I realized, I've not really read a lot of Silver Age Superman, or honestly, I don't think I've really read any 60s Superman. I've read a couple issues from the 40s and 50s and a couple more modern things, and of course I've read about the first year to year and a half of Golden Age Superman, which I absolutely adore, and I've wanted to pick up some of the omnibuses, but they're of course very expensive and they go in and out of print, and then you have to worry about DC's reprint program and not ever finishing and all that fun stuff, which he also discussed. But when I went to the comic shop and they had some of the same stuff he had been discussing, I was like, okay, this is a sign. I'm just gonna get this and read this. So I partially blame Michael K. Vaughan for this big stack. I mean, he may have had some to do with a little bit, but I figured I would go over these and basically do my own little tie-in video to the wonderful Epic Comic Book Wednesday that they do. So if you don't watch Booktube videos, I do still recommend his channel. It's of course one of the bigger Booktube channels, but it's a wonderful channel that discusses primarily books and comics, but also the subjects relating to said books. So he'll talk about movies and other things as well. And the realm of book collecting does really sort of go hand in hand with physical media collecting as well, because if you think about it, book collecting was around a long time before physical media collecting. So there are a lot of parallels essentially. So I do highly recommend his channel if you have not seen it or checked it out before. So I'll go over the single issues first. The special they were running is they had one of their big sidewalk sales where they put a bunch of old boxes of comics out, and all the issues were $1, but then everything inside dated over a year in terms of the date on the price sticker was half off. So basically their entire inventory from 2021 and before was half off. So I chipped away at some stuff I'd been meaning to get, or some particular characters I like to focus on. So I was finally able to get the second of the 2 issues of the movie adaptation in comic form of the 1994 Shadow film with beautiful Michael Kaluta artwork. I've had the first issue, I've just never gotten the second one. This is from Dark Horse, and they basically adapted the movie into comic volumes. This does pretty much follow the 1994 film, which blended the radio and pulp Shadow versions together, and I still adore the film. So I've just been meaning to get the second half of the movie comic adaptation. Then they also had the first 4 issues of the Marvel Comics Zorro run. This only ran, I believe, for 12 issues in about 1990 or so, but this was the first major Zorro publication in comics, the first one in quite some number of years, so it had been a substantial amount of time. So these are beautifully done, but they rarely pop up. I have a couple issues from later in the run, and so I've just always meant to get the others, and they had the first 4 bagged and boarded, for less than $2 each. So I was like, okay, this was worth coming in for. They also had one of the more modern Zorro runs from American Mythology Comics, who has done a variety, I think, of both new and reprints of classic Zorro comics. This is one of the variant covers of issue number 1, and it was literally in the box with the others, and it was literally $1 something. So I was like, okay, well, I'll take this one too. And the cover is quite nice for the fox there, looking ultra dramatic. Now to move on to the trades and trade paperbacks. The first 2 were just some random volumes. They weren't included in the sale, but they were absurdly cheap. This one, I knew there were comics based on this web series, but I've never actually read them. I've read like one random issue that I found before. But they had the Dark Horse sort of smaller trade paperback of the Guild comic, and this is of course based on the web series from a number of years ago, back when the notion of doing a web series was kind of a novelty and not something that people really invested a lot of thought into. And I think it's one of the ones that really sort of promoted the idea that a web series could be not only well done with a sort of micro budget aesthetic, but actually good. I still really enjoy and have a lot of fun memories of seeing this, and so I've always meant to read the comics. And again, this is a release from Dark Horse. I think there's 2 or 3 volumes overall. This is just the first one, but this was just a cool find because I've been meaning to read this. Speaking of more meaning to read, they had the second volume of the Dick Tracy comics, the strips that are done by the writer Max Allan Collins, who took over as the Dick Tracy writer a number of years ago. I think there are 3 volumes of his Dick Tracy strips that are in this format. This is in practically mint condition. I think these retail for about 20-something each, but this was, only $2. And I've always meant to read more Dick Tracy. I've read a few of the original early strips, and there are, of course, some really nice hardcover collected editions, but I think it's like 25 volumes to get the whole long-running run under the original writer. So, since this was only $2, I figured I would check it out, and the quality looks excellent. It's, of course, black and white, but the layout is nice, and the detail is well done. So I've always just meant to read more Dick Tracy strips, and for $2, it's like, is this the right price sticker? Yes. Okay. I'll go for it. This next one is a Dynamite trade, which is the collection of the Green Hornet 66 meets the Spirit. So this brings together 2 of the iconic classic era vigilante characters. The Green Hornet 66 is, of course, using the iteration from the classic television show, which was sort of spun off by William Dozier out of the Batman 66 series, but was, of course, much more overtly serious and not satirical like Batman 66. They did do the 2-episode crossover as well. But I had just recently been thinking about the series again and how it's still unavailable on home video and has never been officially released and seems to be tied up in rights limbo, and how I've wanted to dig more into all the iterations of the character. I've read a couple comics and seen a good number of the episodes of the show in very bad quality, or the few times it's been rerun. But that's been about it. And I do want to listen to the original radio series where the Hornet comes from. But this just looked like a lot of fun, and of course, mixing it up with Will Eisner's The Spirit character, and this is sort of a growing out again of the Batman '66 comics, which also did crossovers with the Green Hornet and Kato, among many other characters. So this is basically, I think, Dynamite's sort of spin on that, and mixing the Hornet and Kato with the Spirit. Now, the rest of these are all from DC, and the first two are actually out of print as far as I can tell, and go for quite substantial amounts now, much more than their original list price. This first one I've wanted to get for ages. It's one of my favorite comic runs that I've ever read. It's one of the iconic comic runs, and I just wanted to get a physical version of it, but unfortunately, this most recent paperback trade collection seems to be out of print, although I think you can still get the more deluxe, limited, expensive hardcover version with like a slip box. I think that one's still floating around, but is also a bit more expensive than the list price. That is the iconic Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams run on Green Arrow and Green Lantern. So this is the most recent collected version in paperback form of their iconic run. This is one of the groundbreaking comic industry changing comics of the early 1970s, and this is really probably what got them, it's basically what got them the gig writing Batman and changing the character forever and bringing the character back from the dead, essentially, because if it wasn't for Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, you wouldn't really have Batman today. And the seeds of that, if you've ever read any of the classic Batman stories of their run, and if you haven't and you call yourself a Batman fan, then I don't really think you're a Batman fan, I have to be honest. If you have knowledge of that, you read one page of these and you can see the seeds of that already being planted here. This, of course, is famous for discussing real world issues as well as telling comic book tales, and has the incredible Neil Adams artwork. It's well printed. Of course, the hardcover version will be much fancier, but I just wanted a physical version, and this was actually the last version I had read. I had checked it out from the library and then looked it up, and unfortunately it's out of print, so I don't know if they're going to do a newer, spiffier version, but I was very happy to find this in the local store and on sale too. So I got it for significantly less than what it's going for now. But if you do want a version of this, I do believe you can still get the hardcover, but I think that's going for close to like $100 now. And even this paperback version is, usually sells on eBay for like $40 to $60 or more. So I'm hoping they bring it back into print somehow, because it really should always be in print. The team did do further issues of this iteration of the characters, so that has been collected, I think, once or twice in the past, but that is also out of print. So it would be really great if they brought this back into print, maybe in a new edition, and also did the second volume of the other issues they did. Now, these are all DC Showcase titles, which are a bit frustrating, and I used to just kind of ignore and not think about, because unfortunately they are all black and white reprints, and the paper quality is a lot lesser. Some people describe them as like phone book type binding and paper. So these are very easy to get in condition where the paper is already browning, and because they're thinner paperbacks, they're easy to damage. And so trying to buy used ones or a copy in the store, even if it's just sat on the shelf for, maybe a year or two, it's going to get dinged up by people moving books around on the shelf, or the pages will start to brown or yellow over time. However, with DC's reprint program, and Michael K. Vaughan talked about this too in some of his videos, this is unfortunately some of the only reprints of select material that exists. So for particular runs or eras, you're kind of stuck with getting these showcase volumes unless there's a color version available through a digital subscription service, or if you spend the much more astronomical amounts to get the original issues. But this particular one, I hadn't even realized they had done this as part of the showcase line, and it is out of print and now much more expensive on eBay. And so I splurged a little bit on this because it was full price, but like most comic shops, they will do, they have percentage markdowns on all their back issues. So this was only 25% off, but I couldn't resist because they had the showcase volume of the Doc Savage comics. These were originally done in black and white, so it's perfectly fine to have it black and white here because they were never in color. But this was a very short, limited run of comics based around the iconic pulp character who really is sort of the father of Superman and is the most influential character on the Man of Steel because he is, of course, the Man of Bronze. When you start digging into how pulp characters influence comic characters, it's so direct that sometimes you wonder how they got away with it. But this is also interesting because it's sort of a bizarre minefield of legalities because DC has publishing rights to the character and did at this time, but these I think were originally done by Marvel in the 70s. And of course, Doc Savage is under Condé Nast technically. So there's a bunch of different entities involved, and I think that's why this went out of print really quickly, and I hadn't even heard of its existence. I knew there were Doc Savage comics, but I didn't know there was a collected version and that it had been done by DC for this short window, and they did it as part of their showcase line. So I was ecstatic to find this. The artwork in here is absolutely beautiful. The detail is incredible. And so I think without question, this is probably the most important of all of DC's showcase volumes because this is the one major collected version. And these comics were originally in black and white, so you don't have to worry about it being a color piece of artwork that is, being just reprinted in black and white and, looks almost more like newsprint. The paper quality on these is very good, but you do have to worry about preserving these more because, as you can see, or it's probably not as visible on camera, this was brand new. It had just been sitting there on the shelf for a year or two, and it's already got just a teensy bit of browning, but that is simply due to the paper quality used. But I was ecstatic to not only discover this and realize how out of print and hard to find this was, and again, it was also on sale with their normal back issue discount, so I was like, okay, yes, please. I will take this. Now, this is the volume that I definitely blame Michael K. Vaughan for because he was discussing Superman and the showcases and specifically held up volume 3 of the showcase, which this is where you're getting into the early 60s for the Man of Steel. And he was talking about it, and I was like, I really need to read some of those. That would be fun. I not big on the showcases because they're black and white and they're more cheaply made. But then I find this, and it's on sale, so it's this was literally less than $4. So I'm like, okay. I'm I'm sunk. I just came in to maybe buy one comic, but here I am getting thousands of pages of comics. So these are great deals when you find them out in the wild, and their list prices were already low, but then you have to deal with the fact that these are rather cheaply made. That the covers do look quite nice. I do give them that, and the printing on them is nice, but you can feel these are very flimsy and they are cheaply made, but these are about the only reprints that exist for certain material. And again, you're getting into late 50s, early 60s Superman material. And these look great, but again, the problem is they are black and white. But honestly, that, I've read these before in terms of other showcases, and you kind of forget about that over time. There are times where you wish, I wish this was actually in color. But sometimes reading in black and white helps you focus more directly on the story and the actual artwork itself in terms of the lines and the inking and everything. So it is a bit of a trade-off, but to get these, and particularly for the very cheap prices that these can go for, particularly in local comic shops, they do reproduce the original covers as well. These are, about your only option for material like this. So I was very happy to find this because this was the one I had actually had on my brain because this is the one Michael K. Vaughan was talking about. So yeah, couldn't resist. Now this last one was so cheap that I was like, okay, now I really can't resist this one. I've never read any stories of this character, but I knew of his existence. This is the Showcase Volume 1 of The Elongated Man. And this was actually included in their half off sale. So this was literally, what, $3.25. I was like, oh, well, you know, over 500 pages of comics, and it's a well known character I've always heard about and never read. So I, if it's a cheap book or comic and it's in good shape and it seems interesting, I'm weak. I can't help it. I have too many books already, but what's another one? Uh, this is in decent enough shape. It's got, a little bit of wear, much better condition wise than what you usually find showcases in. Uh, but of course, the pages are a little bit more browned. As you can see, that there's a little bit of color shifting. Just for reference, here's the Superman volume next to it, which you can see is much more like what you would find brand new, because it is brand new and this one is used. But this is what will eventually start to happen to all of these, just because they're more cheaply manufactured. This just looked like too much fun. The artwork looks lovely, and again, it's just a character I've heard about but never actually read. And of course, all the other notable faces pop up, including Batman. So it's like, well, as a giant Batman nerd who has the insane desire to read every Batman story ever published, even though that's practically impossible, I'm like, oh, well, the Dark Knight detective appears in here and it's cheap, so I have to buy it too. So those are the comic books in this giant stack that I have picked up recently at my local shop. If you have not checked out your local comic shop, or if you've never been to your local comic shop, if you're lucky enough to have one in your town, I do highly encourage you to check them out, and of course support them wherever possible, because they do need all the help they can get to stay in operation, especially in this day and age in 2023. And if you're interested in books and comic books, I absolutely recommend Michael K. Vaughan's excellent Booktube channel, where he also discusses comic books every Wednesday. I hope this has been at least somewhat fun and informative to hear me babble about comics and classic characters that I'm a giant fan of, and just random finds from my local comic shop. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.